जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रंजन, यमुना तीरावनचारि, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रंजन, यमुना तीरावनचारि, नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रसाय भूतले, श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामी नामिने, नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे, निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्यत्यादिशतारिणे, जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद, श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, जय प्रभुपदा प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा, जय गुरुदेवा गुरुदेवा गुरुदेवा, जय गुरुदेवा, जय कृष्ण बलराम जय वृंदावन, जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय, जय ललित विशाख जय राधेश्याम, ललित विशाख जय राधेश्याम, जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमते श्री भक्तिवेदांत श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। ISKCON VBT फाउंडर आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद। जय विष्णुपाद श्रील गौर किशोरदास बाबा जी महाराज की जय। जय विष्णुपाद श्रील सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्रील जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ सद्गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपिका श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री मायापुर वृंदावन धाम की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी तुलसी देवी की जय। श्री यमुनामाई गंगामाई की जय। सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय। ISKCON गुरु वृंद की जय। All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guru. Hare Krishna. Thank you once again for giving me an opportunity to speak and learn something about Bhagavad Gita, and especially today's verse is very instructive for me. So today we are reading from Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, text 39, 439, entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We chant the verse for 3 times. Śraddhāvāḻ labhate jñānaṁ, tat-paraḥ saṁyatendriyaḥ, jñānaṁ labdhvā parāṁ śāntim, acireṇādhigacchati. śraddhāvāḻ labhate jñānaṁ, tat-paraḥ saṁyatendriyaḥ, jñānaṁ labdhvā parāṁ śāntim, acireṇādhigacchati. śraddhāvāḻ labhate jñānaṁ, tat-paraḥ saṁyatendriyaḥ, jñānaṁ labdhvā parāṁ śāntim, acireṇādhigacchati. We got to chant the word-to-word meaning. Śraddhāvān, a faithful man. Labhate, achieves. Jñānaṁ, knowledge. Tat-paraḥ, very much attached to it. Saṁyata, control. Indriyaḥ, senses. Jñānaṁ, knowledge. Labdhvā, having achieved. Parāṁ, transcendental. Śāntim, peace. Acireṇā, very soon. Adhigacchati, attains. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Purport. Such knowledge in Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. One is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, he can attain the highest perfection. The faith is attained by discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. A person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls his senses can easily attain perfection in knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So today we are discussing on 439. The main 2 prerequisites here in this verse described is a man should be faithful, and also he needs to control his senses. So when we see the dictionary meaning, what is faith? Faith means when we have complete trust and confidence in someone or something that will give us the full confidence to achieve something. So usually faith will lead us to action. So here a faithful person, a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge is also led into supreme spiritual peace. So, but for him, he should also be able to control his senses. Then he will be achieving such knowledge, and that will lead him to peace. So, Prabhupada in the purport, he says that one who is faithful man, who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, he can attain highest perfection. So Prabhupada is saying that when someone has faith in this transcendental knowledge, he actually can think that this path is perfect. And because of that strong faith, he will be able to go on to the path of the perfection. So we see a little bit, we will have a little discussion on about faith, and then we go on to the controlling the senses, and then we come to the summary of the how it's leading us actually. So we observe in everyday, day-to-day life actions. Everything we do, we have some faith. Like maybe it's a very mundane example, but this was one of the trouble I faced recently. There was a rat in my house and I was trying to catch it through many ways, but I was not able to do it. And finally, I needed to call a pest control. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe this fellow might be, maybe this fellow might not be. But then I had more faith on him than rather in my own attempts to catch it. And then as soon as he came, he put the traps and the mice got caught. And I was so amazed, like, you know, he did the same things as what I did, but he was able to catch. But I was successful in this endeavor because I put some faith in him. Similarly, anything we do, like we go get enrolled in some school, college, because we have faith that they will give us some knowledge that will lead us to build our careers. Or if we go to a doctor. I mean, there are so many doctors, but we go to one particular doctor because we have faith. We heard from someone saying that, oh, this doctor's hand is very good. He gives the right medicines. So somehow, you know, any action we do, we perform in our lives, it has an ingredient, the most important ingredient called faith. And similarly, Krishna is saying, a person who can put his faith into this transcendental knowledge, he can go onto a long way, and he will achieve this supreme peace. And we see the very next verse, Krishna is quoting, saying that, you know, the person who is ignorant and who is faithless, neither he will be achieving God consciousness, nor he will be happy in this life or next, and moreover he will fall down. So how important is to churn and see where our faith is invested. And even in relationships, whether it's friendship or whether it's having a life partner, we need to have a certain faith. Okay, I am confident that this person will be with me. Then we share the most secrets. So Krishna is telling that this faith is so important that you have to invest in transcendental knowledge. Just in few verses before, we are reading how this knowledge should be learned from a bona fide self-realized soul. But you go to a bona fide self-realized soul to learn the knowledge, but you don't have faith. Then again, it becomes a futile attempt. So Krishna is making a point that we need to have faith. So, and not only that, he is also saying that by investing your faith, the value of this transcendental knowledge will lead you to ultimate happiness. And wherever there is happiness, there will be peace. And this is a definite rule. Knowledge also means, which is light, which opens us. And that also means wherever there is knowledge, there is no ignorance. And wherever there is light, there is no nescience. So I wanted to share one story of what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells to Sanatana Goswami. So Sanatana Goswami, after being arrested by the soldiers of the Nawab, he gets himself free by giving a lot of money to the police guard. And then he escapes, and he finally comes and he meets Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as soon as he sees Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he offers his obeisances, and after that they come and sit down and they start speaking. And the first question, Sanatana Goswami says that, I don't know why I feel very troubled all the time. People call me I'm a Pandit, but I'm not actually Pandit. Because I'm not able to solve the mystery of my miseries. Why I have to face all these anxieties and miseries? Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that, yes, because you are a spirit soul, you are Krishna's servant, Jiva, but you have forgotten that. And then you have accepted this conditioned life. So Krishna says, Jiva Rahoy Krishnera Nitya Das. Every living entity is actually the spirit soul, who is actually the servant of Krishna. When one forgets that, they are automatically put into this miserable conditioned life. So Krishna, and then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu elaborates in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhyalila 20, where these instructions are given to Sanatana Goswami, where he explains, saying that, how the jiva comes in control of the external energy of the Lord. Although the jiva is more powerful than the external energy, but because he has a free will and because he has this lakshana of being able to choose, either you can go towards the superior energy or either you can go to the marginal energy. So he has given a free will. So based on that free will, if he is choosing a material energy, he is automatically giving his control to the material energy to rule over him. And because of that, there is a superimposition of the material nature upon one. So automatically the jiva forgets his spiritual position and he accepts the material conditioning of life. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying that you have forgotten this knowledge of who you are and this is the cause of your material current situation. And in the conversation with Navayogendras, Maharaj Nimi asks, so what is that, it puts the living entity into this illusion? Then Navayogendras, one of the Navayogendras, he also says that when the living entity is attracted by the material energy, which is separate from Krishna, he is overpowered by fear. Because he is separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material energy, his conception of life is reversed. In other words, instead of being eternal servant of Krishna, he becomes Krishna's competitor. This is called vipararyo smriti. To nullify this mistake, one who is actually learned and advanced worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his spiritual master, worshipable deity and source of life. He thus worships the Lord by the devotional service. So just as how we are going through this discussion in the 4th chapter, Krishna also stresses that one has to go to the bona fide spiritual master to gain this transcendental knowledge, because he is able to install that faith and the transcendental knowledge to the living entity. Because faith is not something that you gain from external. It's already there. It's there in every living entity's heart. Because the very fact that the living entity is the eternal servant of Krishna. And by Guru Brahmanda Bharita Bhoy, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata. Sorry, maybe I spelled something wrong. Sorry. So the living entity is rotating in the universe, and he's traveling up and down, going in different planets, in different species, but not by mechanical means, by he's going in repeated number of birth and deaths. That means he's taking so many material bodies. But one fortunate soul, he comes to the shelter of the Guru, and what does this Guru does? He installs this Bhaktilata beach, the seed of Bhaktilata into the heart of the living entity. And by how? By giving instructions, by giving him the transcendental knowledge. Just by listening to the bona fide spiritual master and listening to the transcendental knowledge, this jiva gains the faith. Okay, I am Krishna's servant. But this whole process is called the devotional service. And here we see going back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructing Sanatana Goswami. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes many verses, the importance of the Shastra. So I want to read some of it for you. Sadhu Shastra Kripaya Yadi Krishna Mukhahai Seva Jiva Nistere Maya tat-paraḥ. If the conditioned soul becomes Krishna conscious by the mercy of the saintly persons who voluntarily preach scriptural injunctions and help him to become Krishna conscious, the conditioned soul is liberated from clutches of Maya, who gives him up. So what is the duty of the sadhu? He preaches. But on basis of what? He preaches on the basis of the Shastra. And what kind of Shastra? The Shastra which holds the transcendental knowledge about Krishna, about the relationship between Krishna and the living entity. Let's read some more. Shastra Guru Atma Rupe Apanare Janana Krishna Mora Prabhu Tatra Jiveraha Jnānaṁ. The forgetful conditioned soul is educated by Krishna through Vedic literatures, the realized spiritual master and the super soul. Through these, he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is, and he can understand that Krishna is his eternal master and deliverer from the clutches of Maya. In this way, one can acquire real knowledge of his conditioned life and can come to understand how to attain liberation. So again, this process is dependent on the transcendental knowledge, which is coming through the sadhus, and the super soul is also helping the living entity. And all the three, the super soul, the sadhus, the guru, and the shastric knowledge, all of them coming and helping the living entity to get out of these clutches of Maya and help him walk towards the liberation. Veda Shastra kahe sambandha vidaya prayojana Krishna prapte sambandha bhakti prapte sadhana. So the essence of all these Vedic literatures is about establishing the living entity in the three processes: sambandha, abhidaya, and prayojana. So sambandha is establishing the relationship between the jiva and the living entity, and abhidaya is the process how this relationship can be revived, and the third is a prayojana, the goal. The goal is to revive our conditional, real constitutional situation, which means, identifying and coming back to our true sense that we are servants of Krishna. And what happens when someone comes to that position? Automatically, one becomes happy. We will hear. And then in this connection, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also tells a small story. He tells to Sanatana Goswami about how a poor man is very sad and he approaches an astrologer. And he asks the astrologer, the astrologer asks the poor man, why are you so sad? Oh, because you didn't know where the treasure, where your father has kept, so you didn't know about it. Anyways, you don't worry, I will tell you where is the treasure. So the astrologer says that you go and dig in your backyard, but make sure that you don't dig on the western side because there is a ghost. And make sure you don't dig on the northern side because there is a big black snake. And don't go and dig on the southern side because there are wasps and drones. They might bite you. But go and dig on the eastern side, and as soon as you dig, there will be the treasure pot. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was allegorically explaining Sanatana Goswami that there are so many processes that are mentioned in the Shastras, it's in the Vedas, but don't approach anything other than bhakti. So the western side is the ghost, is referring to the mental speculation, the jnānaṁ. So they are always speculating, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe this is not, that is not. So they are using neti principle or many other principles. But when will they come to the conclusion? They don't know. And in the meantime, our age and life might be finished. And don't dig on the northern side, because there is a big black snake, because it is compared to the mystic yoga processes, where the mystic yogis are interested in kaivalya, liberation. They want to merge into Krishna. And Prabhupada often says that merging into Krishna is nothing but a spiritual suicide. You have given up all the material enjoyments, but you're not reaching to the real point. And then he says, don't dig on the southern side, because you will be attacked by wasps and drones. This is nothing but the karmakanda activities, fruitive activities. Why? Because you might be doing pious or impious activities, and then because of the pious, either you will be elevated to higher planetary systems, or you do impious activities, then you go into the lower species, or maybe you have mixed, then you get a human form. But this is only in human form you have escape out, which is good thing. But again, if you don't utilize, it's again a futile attempt. But on the eastern, so don't go on to the Karmakanda side, on the southern side, because it will just avoid you repeated birth and death. But go on to the eastern side, and there you find the real treasure part, which is the devotional service to Krishna. So the purpose of the Shastra is to help us to reach to Krishna. So the goal of all revealed scriptures and Vedic literatures is Krishna alone. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Vedasya sarvai ahameva vidya. So the ultimate goal of this transcendental knowledge is to come to the lotus feet of Krishna. And thus, as we were just learning the allegory what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave, there's so many Vedic processes given, but none like devotional service would help us to reach our ultimate prayojana, the ultimate goal, to reach to Krishna. So, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continues saying that when one actually becomes rich, he naturally enjoys all kinds of happiness. So, and then when one is actually in happy mood, all these distressful conditions go away themselves. So there is no extraneous endeavor needed. So, and it's a fact, right? When we are happy, we are not really affected by the distress. If we are really happy from within. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, Veda Shastra Kahe Samanta Vidaya Prayojana Krishna Krishna Bhakti Prema Dina Mahadana. So in the Vedic literatures, Krishna is the central point of attraction. And his service is our activity. And so what is our real treasure? To attain the platform of love of Krishna. So Krishna, Krishna's service, and love for Krishna is actually the real treasures of a devotee. So in all Vedic revealed scriptures and Vedic literatures, the central point of attraction is Krishna. But when we come to Krishna, automatically the happiness is bestowed, because we are regaining our natural constitutional position, natural situation. So when we are happy, it will lead us to peace. As exactly what Krishna is saying in this verse. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. So it will lead him, because this transcendental knowledge is all about attaining, coming closer to Krishna and coming to the lotus feet of Krishna. And Krishna also says in one verse to Uddhava, in Bhagavad Gita, I just want to read this. What is the purpose of all Vedic literatures? On whom do they focus? Who is the object of all speculation? Outside of me, no one knows these things. Now you should know that all these activities are aimed at ordaining and setting forth me. The purpose of the Vedic literatures is to know me by different speculations, either by indirect understanding or by dictionary understanding. Everyone is speculating about me. The essence of Vedic literatures is to distinguish me from Maya. By considering the illusionary energy, one comes to the platform of understanding. In this way, one becomes free from speculation about Vedas and comes to me as the conclusion, and thus one is satisfied. So, what does it mean? Krishna is saying that how you will become satisfied, really satisfied, is only when you understand anything you're doing, anything you're speculating is actually in search of me. When someone reaches to Krishna, he becomes completely satisfied. Wherever there is satisfaction, it is there. That's where is happiness, and wherever someone is happy, that's where is peaceful. Peace is attained for sure. So, and then we come to another discussion of another prerequisite of the senses. So, why is sense control an important prerequisite for a faithful man? Because the senses are ever demanding. They don't stop their demands. How faithfully ever you serve them, they want more and more and more. And eventually they drag us down more into sense gratification. So there need to be a checkpoint so that we can utilize them in the right direction. So control of senses means senses should not be used for unnecessary personal enjoyment. That's what Srila Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita 10.4.5 purport. So he's not saying that you should refrain completely, but he's saying that you give a proper engagement for the senses. That means don't go an extra mile to engage into personal enjoyment, but rather use them in a proper direction. And so what is the proper direction? The proper direction is engaging in bhakti. So Prabhupada is also saying in the purport of 10.4.5 Bhagavad Gita that there is no provision for the senses, like it's not that you don't give how do you say, sorry, like you have to meet the needs of the senses, but at the same time that should not become your priority. Like an example, you need to eat, but too much or too little can be detrimental to your health. Either it leads to constipation by eating too much, or too little will be indigestion or weakness. Oh, sorry, constipation and indigestion is the same. Sorry, another one. Sorry, I'm losing words today. Sorry, I don't think I remember the words properly. Okay, and then too much sleep or too little sleep is also again detrimental. Like if you're sleeping too much, you're just going into ignorance, and a lot of ignorance and madness and laziness is on you. And you sleep little, your brain stops working. You can't really have a proper functioning brain. Prabhupada also says that for proper functioning, for proper functioning of the mind, we need to have a restful night's sleep so that the mind can be functioning. And similarly to any other senses. So one's senses should be directed towards Krishna in a very regulated fashion. And in the coming chapters, in the chapter 6, Krishna talks about yuktahara viharasya, how to be regulating our senses in such a way that it will be productive for us. And then Prabhupada also says that, the controlling of the senses and mind is actually called sama, because the mind is also one of the powerful sense that is the king of all senses. And instead of investing our mind and our mind's thoughts in acquiring more and more material acquisitions, if it's invested into the Shastra, into the injunctions of the Shastra and the Guru, it will help us in our spiritual growth. So the power of thought should be developed in association with persons who are the authorities in scriptures, saintly persons, and spiritual master, so that our thinking can be highly developed. And what is this real? So what is the real sense control? It's the engaging in the service of Krishna. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchati. Bhakti or devotional service means simply engaging all the senses in service of the Lord. So by doing that, because Krishna is the master of senses, by doing that, we have two effects. One is we will be free from all material designations. And the other, simply by engaging in that, in Krishna service, we will get purified. Because how do we identify in this material world? With the help of the senses. Whatever we see, we think that should please us. Or whatever we hear, that again should please us. So by the sense of sight or hear or touch or anything what we do is so much self-centered. But when we use the same senses in service of Krishna, it will lead us to the path of liberation. We see that a very good example is Ambarish Maharaj. How he was using each and every sense in Krishna's service. He used to hear only Krishna Katha, and he used to always preach Krishna Katha, or he used to taste only Krishna Prasadam. And he's using his hands to clean the temple of the Lord. He's walking towards the river to bring the water to clean the temple. And he's smelling the incense and flowers that's offered to the Lord. And he is a very good example stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, an example of Atmanivedanam, full surrender. And because of that, he was able to achieve Krishna's lotus feet. And so otherwise, the senses will lead us into many directions and we are distracted. So the prerequisite for a person to achieve supreme spiritual peace is that he should be faithful and he should be able to control his senses. And another point Prabhupada makes in this purport: the faith is attained by discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. I heard a story recently from Gauragopal Prabhu. It's a very beautiful story. Maybe it is in a different context, but I thought this story is very relevant to explain the glories of the Holy Name. Because Prabhupada is mentioned. There are two painters, they go see a king. One of the painters says that, give me 1 month time, I will make a very fabulous painting. Such a painting you will never be have seen before. I will create such a masterpiece that you will be astonished. So the king said, okay, you can do it. And the second painter comes and he says that, I will also create a masterpiece exactly as what the other painter is doing without even seeing. You can put a curtain, like a thick curtain between his work and my workspace, and I will not see his painting, but I will create the same original painting as it is. So the king is very intrigued. Oh, So how is it possible? Okay, so he didn't want to discourage. So he said that, okay, so I give you 1 month time. So the first painters started working, and they put a big, like big and thick cloth between both the workspaces, and they're working opposite to each other. And the first painter, he was asking for brushes, colors, paints, everything. And the second painter, he just asked for some water and some scrubbing stones. So 1 month passed, and the first painter said that I finished my masterpiece, you can come and see. So the king goes and he sees the masterpiece. He's astonished. Wow, he never saw such a masterpiece before in his life. So he gave a huge amount of money to the first painter and he sent him home. Now the second painter, the king asked, did you finish your work? He said, yes, I finished my work as well. So the king said that you remove the curtain. So they remove the curtain. And then the same masterpiece, what the first painter has created, is the same thing he created. And without even seeing. The king was astonished. And he gave double the amount of money to this painter. And he said that, wow, I couldn't believe that you have such a talent. That without even seeing, how could you even know what this person is going to do? And you brought the same thing on this wall. And then out of curiosity, the king asked, what is that? What is the secret? You know, what did you do to gain this art? Then the second painter says that for 1 month, I was actually scrubbing the marble. And I was just scrubbing the marble to that extent that it became so smooth and so clear that it can bring out the reflection of any object that comes before it. So what does it mean? He was just scrubbing the marble wall, and because it was so shiny and so crystal clear that the first painter's work has been reflected onto this wall. So this is the same thing I was thinking about, you know, chanting the holy names. I was reading śraddhāvāḻ, sorry, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Cheto darpana majanam bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam Shreya kairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavadu jivanam Anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnamrita svadanam Sarvatma snapanam param vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtana. So glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar, which we are always anxious. So here, there are two key points I was thinking. Cheto darpana majanam, because this cleanses the dust, the material dust that's accumulated on our hearts, the impressions, the misconceptions of who we are, which we have been carrying from repeated number of births. And the second thing I wanted to point out is it is a life of all transcendental knowledge. And I was thinking how Prabhupada was mentioning in the purport that this faith attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting the holy name, which cleanses one's heart of the material dirt. So this is, as he's just in line with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching, showing how much conviction Prabhupada has that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that this holy name is the life of transcendental knowledge, and Prabhupada mentions the same point in this chapter, in this purport, saying that, this is the only way we will be able to get cleansed. And this is the only way of performing devotional service in this age. Means it is made so easy, so easily accessible, and you no need to go through any kind of yajnas, tapasyas, austerities, with simple chanting of the holy name. And by putting faith in this holy name, it gives us this transcendental knowledge as well as the purification. So I was also hearing on this particular verse from Radhanath Swami Maharaj, and Maharaj was mentioning a point that, hearing the transcendental knowledge clears all the doubts that's been accumulated in us and makes us free from all ignorance. Prabhupada also says, when he titled the Back to Godhead magazine, Prabhupada says, knowledge is light. Godhead is light and nescience is darkness. Wherever there is Godhead, there is no nescience. So that means the Godhead is all about this transcendental knowledge. This transcendental knowledge, there is no room for any kind of ignorance. So just to summarize as what we discussed. So we have seen what is faith in this particular verse. Faith is something which we are convinced of in someone or something. And this faith we see in our contemporary or everyday, day-to-day life activities as well. But the same faith, if we can invest in the transcendental knowledge, it will lead us to happiness and peace. And then we were discussing about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was telling the story, giving instruction to Sanatana Goswami about who he is and why he is in this position. And then he gives an allegory story of a person going to an astrologer and finding the real treasure. So for a devotee, the three main treasures is Krishna, Krishna's service, and love for Krishna. So, and then we heard about the sense control, why sense control is so much important. And what is real sense control? The real sense control is engaging all the senses in the devotional service. And finally, we were coming to discussion of the chanting of the holy names and the story of the two painters and the king. How just by polishing the marble, although he didn't have any big talent, but the very fact that he knows the art, how to capture and utilize what he has. In the same way, we may not be born in the very advanced ages of the ages. We might be just products of the Kali Yuga, but still we have been given the best and easy sublime process of chanting the holy name. And how Prabhupada is in line with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's words that chanting the holy names is the life of the transcendental knowledge. Hoping and praying that I can also take to seriously the chanting of the holy names, and I hope some little inspiration has come to you all, whoever has heard. Any questions or comments? I end here. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, everybody. I've allowed you to unmute. If you have some questions, please raise your hand and ask. Hare Krishna, does anyone have any questions to ask? Comments? Guru Gaurav, please unmute yourself and ask.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mataji.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
such a nice class. It is very interesting and very devotional. Well,
Sorry,
I just want to share my feelings that in this slope, most of this space is in fat. I also do devotional activities only. But ultimate result is only śānti, only peace. Intermediate steps I feel are more important because you have to go for so many devotional service, which are very important. And what we are ultimately getting is just peace. So that was surprising. We have to do so many devotional service, in Krishna consciousness, all chanting, everything. And ultimately, peace is that important.
Okay. So is that a question or a comment? I didn't understand.
It is mostly comments, mostly.
Okay, okay. Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for pointing out that. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Okay.
Prabhu.
My question is that this verse says that one attains supreme spiritual peace by transcendental knowledge.
Yes.
And the peace which we are getting from devotional service and the peace one gets from transcendental knowledge, what is the difference?
There's no difference. Because transcendental knowledge is all about how we have just discussed. The transcendental knowledge should lead us to Krishna. And that is the peace, what we get. And interesting, you asked me this question. I skipped to I skipped to read this one. But in the same instructions of Sanatana Goswami, to Sanatana Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives an important verse. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to read. Okay, here. Sorry, just give me 1 second. So, because the transcendental knowledge is non-different to devotional service, Prabhu, it should lead us. Then only it is called transcendental knowledge. Otherwise, it's not the transcendental knowledge. Wait. So the verse, please forgive me for just 1 second. Let's do it this way. It's a very beautiful verse how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also quotes. Yeah, this one. Yeah, the goal of love of Godhead is not to become materially rich or free from material bondage. The real goal is to be situated in devotional service to the Lord and to enjoy transcendental bliss. So he himself confirms that we will be able to enjoy the transcendental bliss. And how can you enjoy bliss without having peaceful minds? So yeah, hope I have answered you.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji. Please forgive me for my shortcomings, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
We're always happy to hear from you. And next week, so for Purushottam, we'll have a special on the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, okay. 15? What is it?
15 next week on Friday, the 18th, is the
Yes,
start of Purushottam.
Oh, so we will be reading 15th chapter.
Yes, so for the whole month I've divided up so we can read the 15th chapter for the whole month of Purushottam. So we'll hear
Jai.
from you sometime in that month as well. Okay,
Thank you so
you.
much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.